All right. I'm going to start. By my clock, it's about 5:02. I know today obviously turned out to not be an ideal day to do this because of the storm, and there are many people that lost power. I had power gone for a little while, but it came back. So as I like to do for everybody, every 4 to 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks, I want to give you an update as to what's been going on, what hasn't been going on, things of that nature. The last time we were together, we had completed the settlement with Prospect and Angel Pension, which was a $30 million settlement. The net funds of that settlement were deposited into the plan, and at that time put us slightly above 90 million with benefit payments and things of that nature. Right now, the plan balance is in the range of $88 million, which if people can recall, when we started this back in 2017, we had about 87 million. So that settlement with Prospect and Angel put us higher than where we were 4 years ago. Basically hit the reset button for us in terms of a cash position. Since that settlement, there hasn't been a lot that has been done. The majority of what's been done has been done in the liquidating receivership, which is Tom Hemmendinger, who took over the legacy hospital, so old St. Joe's and old Roger Williams, and is liquidating those for our benefit. We've been working with Tom Hemmendinger. There are monies that we believe are collectible and due and owing to us. And so we've been working with him to try to get those monies or the information so we can establish how much we can get out of that estate. And yes, as of yesterday, we actually had one of the issues is with regard to a workers' compensation escrow that was put with the Department of Labor for workers' comp claims from the hospital. And we're dealing with Beacon. We've asked for some documents. They didn't provide them. We filed a motion to compel them to provide them. And Judge Stern told us to go in front of another judge to try to work out what we need and what we don't need, which I imagine we'll be doing that very, very soon. Assuming we can get all of that, there's another DEM issue that's involved as well. I believe that there's some substantial dollars there to obtain for you guys for this plan. Don't hold me to this number, but I believe that at the end of the day, if we get everything that we believe we're supposed to get, it'll be about another $7 or $8 million out of that estate. And then that leaves, as far as collectability of things, that leaves the diocese. I can share with you that we are at the end of October, at the beginning of October, might have been the last couple of days of September into the beginning of October. We had scheduled at Judge Smith over in the federal court at his suggestion, we had scheduled a 3-day span of mediation with the diocese. I can't get into a whole lot of details of what happened, but I can tell you, and you'll probably glean from what I'm about to tell you of how successful it went, that the 3-day mediation lasted until 3 o'clock on the first day, and we never met again after that. So the result of that mediation, which we had hoped, and Judge Smith had hoped would be something that was fruitful and that would accomplish or at least close the gap on certain things, ended up not really being that helpful, to the point where even the mediator acknowledged that coming back for a second or third day was, at this point, was not worth it. So the mediation ended the same day that it started. Doesn't mean we can't go back, but as of right now, we have nothing scheduled to go back. And there are currently motions pending in federal court related to what's called a summary judgment. That was actually, it was a summary judgment that was filed in connection with Prospect issues. We had filed, Prospect had filed a summary judgment motion. We had objected to it, or actually, I'm sorry, flip that. We had filed a summary judgment and Prospect objected to it. And then obviously we settled with Prospect. So we believe that became moot. But the diocese came forward, and even though they didn't respond to that motion initially, and actually the only response they gave was to say that they were taking no position on it. They came back after the Prospect settlement and asked the judge to grant our motion for summary judgment, which was related to the date in which the pension may or may not have become an ERISA plan. Obviously, we were making that argument with regard to Prospect, but it did not really apply to the diocese, and the diocese took no position. So we basically told the judge the issue's moot, and now we have to relitigate the issues. Well, we haven't even started to litigate the issues, but we have to re-argue the issues with the diocese. They can't jump on somebody else's back that's no longer in the case and say we took no position, but now we are taking a position, and the position is consistent with their position. So that's where it stands. That may be a little confusing. I'm happy to clarify if anybody has questions on that. But it's some technical motions going in front of Judge Smith, which he did not want to deal with if the mediation was going to be successful. But as I just got through saying, with the mediation not being successful, we are moving ahead with those motions in front of Judge Smith in federal court. So as of right now, with regard to this receivership, the plan's receivership, other than what goes on in federal court, absent another settlement that we're going to ask Judge Stern to approve, I'll just be giving the judge updates on what's going on in the various matters, but we're not asking him to do anything at this point. PBGC, we are still giving them information. They're still informed of everything that's going on, and they still have taken no position one way or the other as to this plan or their position regarding this plan. So there's nothing new to update on that. And like I said, federal court are those motions between the diocese and us. And then we also have the liquidating receivership is a little more active, because there's that number somewhere in the vicinity of $7 million that I believe we can collect and put into this plan to help this plan. Barring that summary, I will open the floor, as I typically do, to questions from anybody who wants to ask them. You can unmute. Everybody is on mute, but I left it so you can unmute yourself if you have a question. So if anybody wants to ask, Diane, I see you raising your hand. Just unmute yourself. Let me see. Can't hear you yet.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yep, I got you now.
Okay. My question goes back to the PBGC. Are we still paying premiums annually?
We are. So once I made the election to be covered under ERISA. So remember, this was being classified by the Diocese of Prospect as a church plan, which was exempt from the ERISA requirements, which also means it did not have PBGC coverage.
Correct.
So a church plan, although it can be exempt, can voluntarily elect to be covered under ERISA, and therefore potentially be covered under the insurance, which is PBGC. I made that election. I made it effective. I believe it was, I made it in 19, but I believe we made it effective as far back as we could, which made it maybe 17 or 18. And PBGC hasn't taken a position on whether or not that election, because keep in mind what we've done is
I can't hear you.
Never been done before.
Okay.
Say that again?
I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay.
I missed something about what couldn't
I
be done
apologize.
before. Yeah. No, that's okay.
Right.
So I guess
So
my major question would be, if our plan ran out of money, we still don't have any confirmation from PBGC that they would still continue our pensions. Is that correct?
We don't have that confirmation yet. The money that's in the plan is enough to sustain us for several years. I think our runway at current payouts and things like that is somewhere between 7 and 10 years right now. So we will have an answer from the PBGC before that. Under the PBGC's guidelines, there is what's called a 5-year phase-in. The question is really, when does that 5 years begin to start ticking? But regardless of when it starts to tick, once you've paid premiums for 5 years, each year that you pay premiums,
I
the
see. That's my
PBGC would be,
question.
yep, each year you pay premiums, the PBGC would be obligated to honor a certain percentage of your pension. Until in year 5, it would be 100% up to their
100%.
maximum amount.
Okay.
So
And how
we've
many
been
years
paying-
so far?
Say that again?
How many years so far we've paid to?
Well, we paid, yep, we're about to pay our 3rd year. We elected to be covered under ERISA effective, like I said, it was either 17 or 18. But it's unclear from the regulations when PBGC considers that 5-year phase-in time to start.
Mhm.
Obviously, we would argue as soon as we made the election and made our first premium payment, we believe that at the very least, that's when it would start. But we haven't had that discussion with the PBGC, and they haven't taken a position on it yet.
Okay.
So that's one of those things. I will tell you that the PBGC has made a very informal indication to us that they'd like to see all the, what I'll call ancillary issues resolved before they want to address us in our situation. You know, pretty much get as many assets into the plan as you can before
Sure.
you let us know that we need to take over. But they have not taken a position on whether or not they would take over and at what level if they did, or when that would happen or anything like that.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? Marilyn, go for it. Nope, can't hear you. Still off.
There we go.
There
In
you
light
go.
of all the legalese you just used, does this mean that we're taking the diocese and the bishop to court?
As of right now, because there's been no, we haven't had a successful mediation, then as of right now, we are proceeding through litigation the way we would normally proceed through litigation. So
Does that mean that we need to get more documents, or do we have enough?
that's a very good question. There are more documents that we want. We did, obviously, as you know, in the beginning of this case in 2017, leading up to the filing of the lawsuit, we did get a lot of documents from all of the various entities that we ultimately ended up suing. That doesn't mean that that was the universe of documents that we needed. Those were the documents that we believed were necessary to help determine whether or not there was in fact a lawsuit that could be brought, and if so, against whom. So now that we're in the lawsuit, there are additional documents and information that we would require from the diocese. And we have not even gotten to the point of even asking for those documents. I think Judge Smith, along with Judge Stern, was hoping that, similar to everybody else in this case, that the diocese would step forward and show a willingness to settle. And as of yet, that doesn't mean it won't happen, but as of yet, that has not happened. So we are willing to have those discussions. We were willing. We sat down in good faith on that first day of mediation. And it did not result in anything meaningful.
Seems like the good faith is the issue. The good faith is not there. I know you can't answer me as an attorney, but the good faith to me is not there. It never was there.
Yeah, I can tell you we were there in good faith.
Oh, I know that. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the other guys.
Yep. I mean, I will say that there were several members, representatives of the diocese that were there. The bishop was not one of them, which was not
Surprise.
which was not necessarily a surprise. But they did have several attorneys and several representatives. They had, I think, 3 people from the diocese that were there, as well as their attorneys.
Mhm.
So hopefully we will. I do know the mediator has asked us to come back informally for a discussion to see if maybe he can revive the discussions. We have not scheduled that date yet, but he's hopeful that we will be able to revive something.
He doesn't know them like we do. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Thanks, Steve.
Anytime, Marilyn. Any other questions that anybody has? Ken, go right ahead.
Do you have any idea what the value might be of the workers' comp issue?
Yes, the escrow that's there is about $750,000. So it's, obviously $750,000 is real money, but that's compared to, 30 million or 15 million or even the 7 million that I think we can get from the liquidating receivership.
Yep.
It's not a lot, but it does add to that pot. So that, like I said, there are a number of issues. Basically, one of the big reasons why we have an issue there is because Beacon, who is the insurer or handles the insurance for the workers' comp issues, and DEM have claims that they made in the liquidating receivership, which means we would have to share money with them if there was a distribution. We are trying to work with the receiver. The receiver there, Tom Hemmendinger, agrees with us that those claims are not valid and should be challenged. And ultimately, that's what we're doing, is we're trying to figure out exactly what the basis of those claims are and see if they can't get resolved, so that we're the only creditor left in the liquidating receivership, which would mean all of those funds would come to us. I think we'll be successful in that, but it does take time to get the information.
Well, 750,000 would cover about 3 weeks, so that would help.
Yeah.
DEM, what is that? What is that issue?
DEM, that's an issue, oddly
It's
enough,
DM.
it's the Department of Environmental Management.
Oh, okay.
So that is an issue that actually originated back in the 1970s. Where there was a claim that a number of parties, one of which was St. Joe's, I believe, it was either St. Joe's or Roger Williams, I think it was St. Joe's, was accused by DEM of disposing of materials improperly back in the 70s. There's been nothing that's been done. As far as I can tell, the only evidence against St. Joe's is somebody who picked something up at St. Joe's and brought it to the dump, but that person was not aware of what was in the containers that he dumped. He just knows that he picked something up and dumped them. And quite frankly, St. Joe's even is one of the much, much more insignificant parties that were actually accused of this, and why this has been languishing for about 40 so years without any resolution is beyond me. But DEM, although they don't have a hard number and they don't have an allocation to St. Joe's, made a claim in the liquidating receivership of $50 million. Or I think they said that it was in excess of 50 million. So we're trying to get information so that we can better understand what that claim is with the liquidating receiver, so that we can either offer a small settlement to have them go away, or to challenge the claim in full and not pay them anything. But that's a significant, if that goes away, then that obviously, that doesn't necessarily bring money in to Tom's estate, but it makes us the sole creditor in that estate. So it would increase the money that we would take out of that estate.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Yes. You're on mute.
I was going to say Steve, but it's really Donna. And in the time, are we ever going to have an actual court date to where some of us can show up again, just to reinforce the fact that, you know, there are real people behind all this?
So you're asking for an in-person hearing if there's going to be an in-person one?
Exactly. If you have to go back to court with the diocese, we would know about it in advance so we could be a presence.
You would know about it in advance. And as of right now, they are starting to do some hearings in person, more trials than just general hearings. I don't know if the federal court has started that, but I do know that the Superior Court has. And, you know, depending on how things go with the increase or decrease in the incidence of coronavirus, the court will make that determination. Obviously, one concern that the court certainly would have is opening up the courtroom for a trial of, say, you know, 3 or 4 litigants is much, much different than opening up a hearing in which dozens of you show up, and that creates that close proximity problem. So I will, you know, to the extent that we can do something in person, we will. To the extent that there's some alternative that I can suggest, so that I will tell you right now, Judge Smith and Judge Stern have not lost sight of the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds of you involved. They have not lost sight of that. They haven't forgotten that. Just because they don't see the purple shirts in front of them while they're sitting on the bench doesn't mean that they don't know that they're out there. Whether or not the other defendants are still cognizant of that or remember that as we're dealing with these things, I can't say. But I do know the judges do. I know that I do. I know Max does. The liquidating receiver does as well. So your presence is known and felt even if we're on a Zoom hearing.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Yes, Mike's laptop. Let me, you got to unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm just curious if we know anything, what do we know, if anything, about the resources that the diocese has? The financial resources.
Because we haven't been able to do any discovery hasn't started, I can't really answer that. I will tell you that there is some legislation that I think is, if I don't know this for certain, but I would imagine it's making the diocese concerned, is there's some legislation in place that would expand the statute of limitations for sex abuse cases. I think that the diocese may believe that that does not apply to them because of the way the statute is written. But obviously, if the statute of limitations is extended and it applies to the diocese, that could financially impact the diocese. I don't know for certain because I haven't done any discovery, but I can just surmise based on what I know from the past and what I know about statute of limitations and claims and things of that nature. Claims that might have been precluded under a prior statute of limitations might now be revived. And anytime that happens, there's a risk for a further drain on resources.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Yes, Marilyn. Marilyn, you're at the beach. I can't.
Yeah, I know I am. You like that?
I do.
Yeah. The beach on Roger Williams Avenue. Anyway, does that mean then if that legislation passes, that the sex abuse cases would have priority over ours?
That's not what that means. It just means that the diocese would have to direct resources to not only defending certain cases, but also they would be having to direct resources over there if they were settling those before they settle with us. So we're there where, you know, they've already committed funds to defending this case. But whether or not the diocese is looking at their potential exposure elsewhere and that is that's driving what they are willing to do with us or not. I can't say, but it certainly would not be resources would go there first rather than to us first. It's really whoever enters into the settlement first or gets to the end of trial first is where the monies would be committed first.
Oh, wow. That puts a little bit of stress on everybody.
It could. Like I said, there's nothing that has happened yet. So it's merely a potential out there. And I don't know if the diocese, if their financial position is such where it's something, well, both their financial and their legal position is such that it's something they're worried about or not worried about. I just know that that's out there and it's a potential for something that could impact things for them. Anybody else? Any other questions? If there are no other questions, going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right, if there are no other questions, obviously, if you think of something after we hang up on this, you can always email myself or Julie, and we'd be happy to get back to you and answer that question. Other than that, I want everybody to take care. I will we'll set another one of these up. There will be one more before year end, possibly more than one if something of significance happens, which I think you guys will want to know about as it's happening. But barring any type of resolution or mediation success or anything like that, we'll probably schedule one for about 6 or 8 weeks from now. So I'll see you maybe right around Christmas time.
Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I wish we could do it in person, but
Maybe soon.
maybe soon. Maybe soon. But everybody have a good night. Stay safe.
You too.
And I will
You
see
too.
everybody in maybe about a couple of months.